Good evening, everyone. It's only the privilege to be able to share with you on the topic of work-home balance. I trust that as we spend these few minutes talking about work and home, and I guess I might can throw in church as well, that God will give us a clearer vision as to what He calls us to do and what He wants us to do in this time. Let me just start by indicating where we're going tonight. We're going to be talking about, of course, the need for balance. We're going to look at the temptation of workaholism, prioritizing, being intentional, putting things in perspective. And we're going to close with balance is difficult, but essential. There are just two Bible verses that I will use to anchor tonight's presentation. First one is 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 10, where Paul says, "For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat." That's 2 Thessalonians 3:10. Paul made it clear here that work is something that we are expected to do. And I think automatically we would agree that we need to work, because especially if we have families, we need to put food on the table. We need to take care of the material needs of our families. But I want to suggest at the outset that work is more important than providing for our families. As important as that is, I want us to remember that Adam was working before he had a family. Adam was working before he had a wife. One of the first things God did when God made Adam was to give him work. He placed him in the garden. He had prepared the garden for him, and he placed him, and he says, "Tend the garden." So work is something that God expects us to do. It's not a shirker cannot. Well, let me rephrase that. In shirking work, we do not please God. God wants us to work. It's part of the things that identify us. We must work, no question about it. But in Psalm 127, verse 2a, we read, "In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat." Right away, we are seeing here an instruction to be balanced. Paul says if you do not work, you should not eat, because we are supposed to work. But here the psalmist is saying, don't rise up early and stay up late. In other words, don't overextend yourself just to get more food to eat. Don't overextend yourself, and in that time they would refer to it as food. But today we would say, don't overextend yourself necessarily to get more and more money. He said, in vain you do that. And we're going to be looking at maybe what are some of the possible reasons, but just to set things in perspective, the need for balance is right there in the scripture. We must work, but at the same time, we must not be consumed by work. And, by extension, if we are over-consumed, if we are rising early and going to bed late, it means that we are cutting into our sleep time. Even if nothing else, we are cutting into your sleep time. We are depriving of our bodies of the rest that it and the opportunity it needs to rejuvenate itself and to renew itself. So right at the outset, the need for balance is made clear in scripture. This evening I'm going to be, I think Brother Renfred said, I'm going to be helping you to show you how to achieve balance. And I think that's what I was asked to do, but I don't think I have the competence to do that. What I can do is to help us to think about work and to think about home and to think about the other things that compete for our time, and to see if we can put everything in balance. At the end of the day, it really is not just work and home that compete for our time. Church is a big part of that competition too. And of course, there are other activities. But there's some questions we need to ask ourselves as we seek to check ourselves and to ask, are we balanced, and how can we get balanced? One of the things is working hard and long hours necessarily a good thing? Paul says, if you don't work, you mustn't eat. We pride ourselves when we work hard. It's like a badge on our shoulder. It's something to be proud about. As I said before, we are not expected to be shirkers. The Bible talks about against laziness. But is it necessarily a good thing when we work hard and long hours? Just something for us to think about. Another thing to think about is what or who gets sacrificed for extended or long work hours. If you have extended hours, I think you're going to cut sometimes somewhere else. What gets sacrificed, or who gets sacrificed? I wonder if could it possibly be time that you'll have spent with the family, time you'll have spent with the children, but somebody's paying the price if you're spending extended hours at work. Could long hours? These are some hard questions to look at, but I just want to emphasize that there are questions, and it's just for us to ask ourselves these questions and not accusations. Could long work hours be a result of greed? I want to think that there are some Christians who are guilty of this. Sometimes, the opportunity is there for overtime. The opportunity is there to do that second job. We have other things that we could use our time to do. We have other things that we need to do. But I would want to think that for some people, long work hours are a result of greed. It's not necessarily that we are working these long hours because of need. It could be that greed has set in, and it's just something we need to ask ourselves some questions about. Could we be trying to keep up with the Joneses? So here it's not need, but it could be envy. The Joneses have so much material stuff, and we think if we have less than them, then somehow we are less, and we are trying to keep up. It happens in life, and we need to ask ourselves, is this happening to me? Maybe, I don't know if this last one is more troubling, but could long work hours be due to a lack of faith in God to provide for us and for our families? Is it possible that it could be due to a lack of faith? We believe that we have to work in order to send the children to school, ensure that we have health education, ensure that there is enough put up for rainy day, ensure that we have the pension all worked out. A number of things are being ticked off. Could it be that we do not trust God enough to provide, and we feel that we have to keep sacrificing and sacrificing and sacrificing family and wife and children so that we can earn more? When this is happening, we always point to the needs, and there will be need for the money. But is lack of faith a part of this? If we're going to balance our work life and our family life, the questions that we ask are not only that we need to do, but as we grapple with these questions, we need to think about how do we prioritize. There are so many things that demand our time, so many things that compete for our time. People, things, schedules. How do we prioritize? How do we use up the 24 hours we have? Men tend to be, and women too, tend to be committed and reliable with regard to work. And that is good. A boss loves a good worker, because a good worker ensures productivity and ensures that the bottom line is profits assured. So a boss loves a good worker. A boss loves a willing worker. Somebody who you can always call on him and he will be there. And let me just again point out that as Christian stewards, we are expected to be reliable. As Christian stewards, when we serve our secular bosses, God expects us to treat them with respect. God expects us to be committed to the work that we do. God expects us to do the work as if we are doing it not unto our secular bosses, but as unto God. So, yes, the boss loves a good worker, and a Christian who works has a responsibility to represent God at his workplace to the best of his ability. But in the end, he is accountable to God for how he uses his time. So the boss will pay more to extract more. The boss is never usually too worried about our health situation. They're not too worried about what happens at home. They're not worried about well, when we work the extra hours, what happens? What kind of adjustments does a wife have to make? What kind of adjustments do the children have to make? The boss is usually not too concerned about that. The boss tends to think that because he's paying us for the extra work, then that's all he needs to take to be worried about. And I guess we can't fault him or fault them for that. We are the ones who have to do the balancing act. We are the ones who have to realize that on the one hand, God expects us to be good, reliable workers to our bosses because that's a way of ministry, but God also requires us to be responsible to our families, which is our first responsibility. So the person who is in the crosshairs is not the boss, it is us. We are the ones who have to decide, where do we draw the line? We pride ourselves on not being lazy. Again, that's good. But could we be guilty of negligence? So we're not lazy, so we will go the extra mile. We will do the extra time at work. We will put it in because boss is depending on us. But are we sacrificing too much? Are we missing out on a graduation? Are we missing out on a game? Are we missing out on some important activity that maybe one of our children was doing? Are we missing out some important project or some important thing that would have required our time? We always have to do the balancing act. And here, I'm not saying that we have to do this or that. I'm saying we really need to think it through. If we are going to achieve balance, it begins with us thinking through what do we need to do with the time we have. There are only 24 hours to the day. This is something we need to bear in mind. Only 24 hours. Things increase and things decrease, but the hours in the day never decrease. Sometimes it seems as if the hours rush by. Sometimes it seems as if they are marking time depending on what is happening with us. But it is always 24 hours. We love to say, and I'm included in that, we love to say we don't have enough time. But that is inaccurate. We always have enough time. We have the same amount of time. It is what we do with the time that is important. We need to decide how we use the time. It is 24 hours in every day. Every extra hour at work costs something at home. I think I've kind of drilled down on this before, so I don't have to stress it anymore. But how valuable is work at home? How valuable is work at home? It is easy for us to think that, okay, this extra money is going to ensure that the school fees are paid and school fees are expensive and all that we need. And I'm not even thinking of extra. I'm not thinking of vacation and the things that we can do without. The extra money is to take care of important things. But we always have to come back and think about it. When we juxtapose working extra time or working long hours with spending time at home, taking care of business, spending time with the children and all of that. How do we compare? Who draws the line of demarcation in terms of what is more important at this time, in terms of what is more valuable at another time? Who calls the shots? Is it our employers or is it us? I want to think that it is not the employers who call the shots. We are the ones who will have to make those decisions. If we're going to manage our time, it is not something that is just going to happen. Managing our time is not an automatic event. Managing your time is not something that we can wish to happen and it happens. We have to be intentional if we're going to manage the time. We have to decide how we treat our family responsibilities. We have to recognize, yes, work is there. We have to work, but we also have to take time and reflect and realize also that what we have to do at home is important. When I talk about working from home, I'm sure you understand. I'm not talking about, doing the boss's work from home. I'm talking about taking care of our family business, taking care of the children, spending time with our spouses, whether our husbands or our wives. That is absolutely important. We have to be intentional about how much value we place on nurturing the family God has given us. It can't be just something that we think about when we have some spare time. It can't be something that we just think about randomly. We have to recognize that this family is our number one priority. It is our number one priority. Even at church, we recognize and we brethren recognize that family comes before church. Family is more important. Our marriage partner well, the person we marry is the most important decision we make, other than accepting Christ as Savior. And the family that we nurture, the family that we bring together as husband and wife, there is just no other responsibility. Everything else must be done so as to ensure that we can protect this family and nurture this family and prepare them for the world. So we have to realize that the home is our number one priority, and we have to be intentional in how we plan to treat that priority in the resources that we allocate, to taking care of business. Do we regard ourselves as stewards of the children God has given us? Because the children we have are not our properties. They are God's properties. But God set us as stewards over them. And it says that he requires that stewards be found faithful. Faithfulness is not just about our ministry to the world outside. It's not just about witnessing. It's not just about living a good Christian life out there. That's a part of it. But even before that, it's about being good stewards at home. We have to be intentional. Without intentionality, there will be no balance between work and home life. And if we're going to be the kind of Christians, the kind of men, the kind of husbands, and the kind of wives that God requires, we have to be intentional about the family he has given us in how we use the time. How do we split the 24 hours between work and home? We have to be intentional about that. It can't be just the boss's decision that we're going to work, whether it's flexi time or this. We must have a say, and we must have a say in how it's split. It's our time, it's our resources, it's our responsibility. Do we actively seek to do so? Is it dependent on how much we are needed at work? A lot of the time, what makes a difference is how much we are needed at work. And especially if there's nobody else who has the expertise that we have in a particular area, then it's as if, we have no choice. But I would like to think we have choice. I'd like to think we have choice. And there are times too when the boss doesn't necessarily feel that he or she has to um, push too much to get other persons to be properly staffed, because they know that they can always lean on John Brown or they can lean on Sister Pat. But we must be intentional about how we use our time. We cannot afford to let other people decide for us. We have to. We have to decide. So who splits the 24 hours? It can't be just them all the time. At least some of the times, it should be us. And when we split the 24, we should be splitting the 24s, bearing in mind that we have a family that we take care of. We need to spend time. Wrapping up, putting things in perspective. Just some other things to think about again as we think about how do we balance work and home. I want to suggest that work is obligatory, but it's a means to an end. We have to work, but we work to put food on the table. We work to make others comfortable. We work to minister to others. We must work, as Paul says in 2 Thessalonians, but it's a means to an end. It is an instrument to get something else done. On the other hand, providing for family can be complicated, but it has eternal value. When we minister to our families and we minister to them effectively, and we minister the love of God, the unconditional love of God, we are preparing people who for eternity will reflect this service that we did them. Because when we do so, we are helping to mold people who are functioning in the image and likeness of God. So when you compare our responsibilities to family and our responsibilities to work, one is temporal, the other has eternal possibilities. Another thing, at work, we are like mere pawns. In a game of chess, the pawn is the character with the least value. The pawns are moved around as the more qualified and the more honorable characters see fit. At work, even when we have big positions and big titles, and we're CEOs and general managers and managing directors, but we report to somebody else, in a sense, we are like pawns. Even when we have the authority to make decisions and to impact other people's lives, even when we have the authority to hire and fire, oftentimes we are like pawns, because there's always somebody else who calls the shots. There's always somebody else who can put a stop, who can move us, can promote us or demote us. So we are like pawns in a sense. We are easily and quickly replaceable. I spoke to somebody at my church a few months ago, and he was telling me about how stressed he was. At first he was talking about, work was stressful, but then he said they had got a little break because they had employed some other persons. But then the other week he was saying, we are back to square one because his supervisor died on the weekend. His supervisor died the Friday afternoon, and by the Monday morning, they were telling him that you are taking over the supervisor's role. Now, it didn't take them too long. Well, that supervisor was key. She was very important to them. But she died the Friday, and by the Monday morning, she was replaced. We're easily and quickly replaceable at work. But at home, we're like the cog in the system. Everything runs around us. And if we are parents, yes, everything revolves around us. We are indispensable. So there's no comparison. It's like at home, we are the kings, but at work, we are like the pawns. At work, we are answerable to man, but at home, we are accountable to God. But just putting things in perspective, when you look at work and home, you realize that no, it can't be just. It can't be right. It can't be reasonable or sensible that work, takes up all the time, that work is the one who calls the shots. We have to find a way to ensure that the home, comes into the picture a little bit. Balance is difficult, but essential. Final second to last slide. Balance is difficult, but is essential. Often we pay undue attention to some aspects of our lives to the detriment of other areas. Sometimes we attend to the urgent and we postpone the important. This happens so often. We're having an important conversation, and the phone rings. Automatically, we move to pick up the phone. And sometimes it's just somebody calling to say, hi, haven't seen you in a while. How are things? And we will talk with that person for 2 minutes, maybe more, while important business is being interrupted. Oftentimes, we allow external forces to make decisions for us. And in many instances, these external forces are work, or our bosses at work. As responsible stewards, we should decide how we invest our talents. The parable that Jesus spoke of, the man who went on a journey and he gave different talents to his workers. They were responsible for investing the talents. And we are responsible for how we invest the talents that God has given us. We all have responsibilities. We have gifts and abilities. We have spiritual gifts and we have natural gifts and abilities. We are equipped to make a difference. But who decides how we invest? Is it us or is it our bosses? We can't afford to let them be the ones to decide. Otherwise, if that happens, then we are going to be treated like the one who had one talent, and we know what he did with his. We are the ones who must rank and value the responsibilities and the resources that God has given us to work with. Nobody else. We are the ones who must rank and value the responsibilities. The final slide might kind of contradict this, because in conclusion, I have to admit that balancing is a difficult act. It is essential, it is necessary, but it's a difficult act. We are in an imperfect world, and we are never going to achieve perfect balance. But to the extent that we can make adjustments to better serve our families, we should. To the extent that we can make adjustments so that we can take back even some of the extra time that we give to our work and distribute it among the family and other aspects. To the extent that we can do that, we really need to try to realign, to restore some balance a little bit. Our first priority, finally, deserves our reasonable efforts. Our first priority is our family. It deserves our reasonable effort. We must try to make it work. We must try to ensure that there's some balance. We will never be able to have the perfect balance. We will not always have all the power and all the options that we would want. But at least we should make that effort. Let's not become slaves of the workplace. Rather, let us be responsible stewards who recognize that we have a responsibility at work, but we also have a responsibility, a greater responsibility at home.